Hi, this is Heidi from Garden Crossings, and today I am going to take you on a garden tour here at the house. It is the beginning of November, and it's actually a gorgeous day today. It is 70 degrees, which is not super typical for us here in Michigan to have a 70-degree day on November 1st. So we are welcoming the sunshine and the beauty of the day with open arms. So in this tour, we are going to look at pretty much, there's a few things still blooming, but we're going to also do a lot of showing you what we've been doing as far as garden cleanup and trimming on several of the plants. So that way, if you're getting ready to do your garden cleanup, you can kind of see what we did, so you know maybe what to do for your garden. For those of you who are new to this station, Garden Crossings is a mail order company. We ship plants all over the United States. So if there's anything that you see me talk about in our videos, you can order them online at gardencrossings.com. and we'll get them shipped directly to your door. So let's go ahead and take a walk through the garden and see what it's looking like currently here in November. It's a beautiful day today, and the plants are just looking so nice with the sunshine on them and the beautiful blue sky in the background. So if you've watched any of my summer videos, you know that we had sun pations up in front of the house here this year, and those have been removed, and now we have put in beautiful garden mums. And these garden mums have been holding on really nicely. They've probably been in for a good month, maybe even a little bit more now, and are still looking really good. Even the white ones, sometimes white can get a little funky, but they're looking really crisp and clean. In the back planter here, we have another garden mum as the focal point. Some celosia that's been hit by frost, but still looks okay. There's some desert plains grass in the back. Some heuchera up front, that nice coppery colored foliage. Those are perennials. And then look at the violas. They're so pretty. These are part of the Frizzle Sizzle series. And one thing I've noticed is that the bumblebees have been just out, like big bumblebees have been out a lot this fall. So it's been fun to kind of watch them in the garden. And then you can see that cute little, I think those are cabbage moth butterflies also enjoying this planter. So the fall planters are hanging on really nice, and I will be transforming these into a winter look, but I'm not pushing winter because I'm not a winter person. I'm a summer girl through and through. So winter will come when it has to, but not too soon. The hanging baskets, so for the longest time, these were just kind of sitting there, not a lot of color. The mums that Rod had chosen were late blooming varieties, and now they are in full color. So we knew it would take some time, but now the color is looking vibrant and really pretty. So, and the other nice thing with these hanging baskets is they're lighted. So at night, it illuminates on these baskets. So even, you know, it gets dark here around about 5:30, these baskets are lit up well into the evening. Two other planters that we did on either side of the entrance. They are doing fairly well. Again, you can see the celosia looks a little sad because of the frost, but the asters, the purple asters, the yellow garden mums, there's even some pepper up front there, and then a few snapdragons that are starting to look a little bit fizzled at this point. The only annuals I have left in my yard is this giant container here by the door, and in this there is the Pegasus begonia, which is that big variegated leafy plant you're seeing. There's also some firecracker fuchsia, which is almost getting just really eaten up. Actually, let's get closer because I think we'll be able to see the flowers. Yes, we can. So there's the firecracker fuchsia, still looking nice with the begonia. And then the supertunias are looking pretty nasty. They're like full of aphid and thrip right now. But from the distance, this planter still looks pretty good for this time of year. That will get replaced soon with a winter porch planter. Front of the house, we have the Bobo Hydrangeas. Those will be getting trimmed here probably this week when the gardeners come. They'll trim about the top third or so off, just get rid of those flowers so that they're ready for next spring. The Proudberry shrub is looking phenomenal right now, and I talk about this plant a lot, and I make sure I always make a point of it when I'm doing the videos, but check out those beautiful pink berries. This is just one of those very fun, unlikely surprises that I have in my garden. The Anna's Magic Balthuyas. People always ask about these in the video, so I'll talk a little bit about them. These have been in the garden now for, I don't even know, several years. I'm going to say 8, maybe 10 years. The description of them describes them as an evergreen that gets about 2 foot tall and 2 foot wide. These particular varieties here, they're maybe 2.5 foot tall and maybe 3 foot wide. So they are slightly larger than what the description states them to get, but it could just be too that my yard is got underground sprinkling, so they're always getting watered. A few more garden mums here just for some pops of color. Got the quick fire hydrangea, and that's going to get trimmed back too when the gardeners come. So we'll probably take, it's really big right now, it's about 8 foot tall. So the typical rule of thumb is to take about 1/3 off the plant, which if we go in here, we can take a look and you can see like there's where it was trimmed back last year. So there's about 2 foot of growth above that. So we'll probably go down about that far again, get it down to about 4 foot or so. But this was looking great up until just a couple weeks ago, and now it's just totally tired for the winter. Looks like there's been somebody snacking on the garden mums. I really haven't seen many rabbits, but if I had to guess, it's probably rabbit damage, although deer will do the same thing. But to be honest, I've never seen deer up in my front yard, although we have seen them on occasion in the backyard. So I'm guessing that's probably rabbit damage. Along the side here, there are more Bobo Hydrangeas. These have been trimmed back to probably about 30 inches or so, just nicely rounded and shaped. Pugster butterfly bush, we're going to leave these this year. We're not going to trim these at all. These here in Michigan were like a zone 5B, 6A. They usually do better if you don't trim them back in the fall. It just leaves a little bit of, I'm going to say, insulation on the plant if you leave that old growth there. And these last year we did trim them, and they didn't struggle coming back, but they just took a long time. So we're going to leave them this year, and hopefully next year they'll come back and be blooming sooner than they did this year. Also in this area, there was a bunch of sedum right along that rock wall, just a low growing sedum that we trimmed back to the ground. The sticks you see sticking up there, that's a hardy hibiscus. We trim them in the fall, although many sites are going to recommend you wait until spring. We don't have time in the spring to trim, so we do it in the fall. Most people are going to recommend spring trimming though. So take that advice, but do what works best for you in your garden. Another Bobo. An incredible blush hydrangea trimmed back to just over 3 foot. In this little area here, there was a lot of coneflowers, so they've all been trimmed back to about just a couple inches off the ground. Butterfly bush blue chip, still blooming, looking great. We won't trim that back at all. Between this arbor was a giant hosta, and you can see we trimmed that baby right back to the ground. There's a few dianthus still blooming. These are part of the Paint the Town series. I believe these are Paint the Town Fancy. So they just kind of continue to bloom throughout the summer, giving just, you know, the spring bloom is their most prolific, but throughout the summer, any little bonus blooms we call a win. Next to the trellis here is a hellebore or Lenten rose. So that's going to be a spring blooming perennial. Sometimes I will trim that back in the fall, but this year we're going to just leave it up because, I don't know, sometimes I like to see one year to the next, like which does better. If you do trim it back, you're going to have all flowers with no foliage. We've got a Veronica there blooming, and in the back is a small little Alstroemeria. That variegated plant, that is a new Jacob's Ladder, and we'll put the name up on the screen because it's so new I don't remember what it is, but beautiful foliage, and in the spring it's going to get little purple scented flowers. This here is Weigela Snippet Lime, trimmed back to about 18 inches. It's losing most of its leaves right now. Behind this little trellis thing is little Quickfire, 3 foot tall. And then another Weigela snippet lime that's at about 2 foot tall. Still going strong, and I love this plant, I talk about this all the time as well, is the Hydrangea Inca Ice. This plant, when it started, was one plant, and it's just kind of, the clump has continued to get larger and larger as the years have gone on, and I love it. Like, it can get as large as it wants because this blooms from early summer until a good hard frost. We've had plenty of frost this fall, even some freezing temperatures, but this plant is still going strong. Just look at all those blooms. Absolutely gorgeous. The circle garden here, we've done a lot of trimming on this. In the middle there was the hydrangea tree. You can reference some of our summer videos to see what this whole garden looked like in its full glory if you want to envision it in full color. I recommend heading to like the July or August video to see just what it looks like in its summertime prime. But in the center there is a limelight hydrangea tree, and basically we took it back to about 2.5 foot from where it branches off there off the main stem. This is also called a standard hydrangea, and this really is a shrub, but it's been trained into tree form, so all the lower branches have been trimmed off to give it that tree shape. So that will be nice next year now that it's all trimmed up. Here we have Bloomerang dwarf purple lilac. This blooms off of the new growth. So we could have trimmed this down a little bit if we wanted to, but it's still sending out some blooms here. November, and this lilac is still blooming. So we'll see, we might give it a little trim yet before it's done, but I mean, look at that, buds just waiting to bloom. They probably won't because it's going to get too cold, but man, if you can have a lilac that's blooming year round or all season long, imagine the smell, the fragrance it will bring to your garden. This is the My Monet Weigela, and those have been trimmed to about 2 foot. Another thing I'm noticing right now is these Atlas roses. The fragrance is just so beautiful right now. Look at that, November 1st, and this Atlas is just blooming like it's midsummer. So many gorgeous flowers and so many buds. Atlas is one of my favorite roses to date here in the garden. I don't have many roses, but I do have several Atlas. I love the big flowers, I love the fragrance, and they really have a nice habit as well. Peach typically wouldn't be my first color of choice, although that Hydrangea had pink tones, or peachy pink tones, but man, you just can't go wrong with the Atlas rose. Next, we're going to head here under the deck. Not much has been done in this area yet. So these are all hostas that are starting to go downhill because of the cold. A couple Rebecca's still blooming there. So this will all get trimmed back to the base, to the ground. It just looks really kind of ratty right now, but that's what frost does. I'm sure you know if you live in a cold area. A nice Bernera still up front there. Look at that foliage, looks really pretty. We have also planted a few hellebore or Lenten rose in this garden. That's that deep dark foliage you're seeing there. Because in the spring, before these hostas even think about waking up, the hellebore are blooming gorgeous. Usually the end of March, beginning of April. We trimmed down the hydrangeas there in front of the window. Those were the wee white hydrangeas, and they've been trimmed back to about 2 foot tall. So this garden still has a little bit of work that needs to be done. I told the gardeners if things were still blooming to just leave them, and as you know the cold hits them, we'll go ahead and get them trimmed. But pretty much all the perennials in this garden are going to get trimmed right back to the base, and that way they are ready for next spring. A few more hydrangeas. These are the mini Mauvette hydrangeas in front of the barn, and these we trim back to about 1 foot. And I am going to encourage you, if you're questioning or have questions on how to trim hydrangeas, I just did a huge series of trimming of hydrangeas of all the different types. So reference the YouTube video library for lots of good information on how to trim hydrangeas. Here we have the firelight grass, and this is one of the latest or later to bloom grasses. You can see it's just starting to send its tufts up. Usually this grass is more grown here in Michigan for its foliage, which right now it looks a little tired, but it's got a green blade with a white stripe in the center, or even in the summer it looks more white with just a little bit of green. But the flowers are really pretty as well, even though they're really late to come to the garden party. We'll head on down to the butterfly garden next and take a look what the gardeners have done in here. So because we have so many hydrangeas in our garden, I did tell the gardeners not to trim them because I wanted to be really intentional of doing videos on those this year, because there's just always so many questions on how to trim hydrangeas, when to trim hydrangeas, and just what exactly that looks like. So like I just mentioned, we have a lot of videos up on trimming of the hydrangeas, before and after pictures. Here we have coneflower. Those have been trimmed back. We could have left the little flower heads on for the birds and such, but we went ahead and just got those trimmed up. I'm looking at our yard here and I'm like, what is going on? There's like all these little brown plugs. So it almost looks like Rod must have had somebody come in and aerate the ground. I don't know. It can't be deer poop because it's everywhere. So I think somebody came in and aerated the grass. Who knew? The things you find when you go out in the yard. This is the Bobo Hydrangea that in the summer videos was just huge and gorgeous, and everybody always commented, how come that Bobo is so big? I thought it was only supposed to get 3 to 4 foot tall. Well, they were starting to get very big, so we did come through and really gave them a good trimming. This is about 2 foot tall now, so I wanted to just dial it back in to the size it was supposed to be, and that way too it just gives some of the other plants in the garden more chance to grow. So there's been several plants that we've planted around this Bobo that just haven't been able to flourish because the sunlight can't get to them. So this does look like it's giving me some space to do some more planting next year. So we'll probably get a few perennials popped in and see how they do. This is the Miss Molly butterfly bush. We're not going to trim this back this year either, just because again, this one, it took forever to kind of flower. I think it was August when it started flowering, and that's just because it needed time to put on new growth because I had trimmed it back to the ground. So we're going to leave it and we'll see next year how it does. If it doesn't come back from the top, we'll just trim out the dead wood and let it go from wherever the new growth comes from. Another Bobo. The other thing when Rod was trimming these is he trimmed out all the dead wood too. So if there was any branches that were dead, he went in and trimmed them out just to kind of clean the plant up. A few little perennials here left. So the last video, this was an anemone. It was blooming. It's done blooming now, so we'll be able to trim that back. Just behind it, that is the Weigela Sonic Bloom Pink. That's been trimmed back to about 3 foot by about 4 foot. This here is a Storm Cloud Amsonia. Kind of looks pretty, even though it's like crunchy, you know. But this is a great spring plant if you're looking for a fun plant for the spring. That will get trimmed back here shortly. Pretty much anything left in here that we're seeing is going to get trimmed right back to the ground the next time the gardeners are here. So this plant's kind of a mystery plant, but I do think it's a Durvilla. I don't remember planting it here, but crazy things happen when I get planting. So I'm pretty sure that's a Durvilla, and that's just really a great native plant, deer resistant, can be planted in sun or shade. It's got great foliage color, and it does get some little yellow flowers that are fairly insignificant. but really a pretty addition to the garden. And it's got some pretty nice fall foliage as well. This here was my beautiful firelight hydrangea. Went ahead and trimmed that back pretty significantly as well. It's, I'm going to say 3.5, 4 foot, probably 4 foot tall right now. And again, rod went through and trimmed out any dead branches. So we just got that nicely shaped up. This here is all sedum. This will all get trimmed back all the way to the ground because it's just really floppy and not looking good. All right, let's head on over now to the Hosta Garden. It's just so fresh and freeing seeing this Hosta Garden totally cleaned up. As we get closer, you'll see what I mean. Check this out. It's like so clear and so clean. You don't see all the yellow slimy leaves. I had the gardeners trim everything back while it was still green and not gross. They appreciated that because it's just easier to clean hostas when they're, you know, still a little crisp and green. So it's just so clear right now. I'm loving this. I love it when the hostas come out, but I'm loving the looks of a clean garden. Here we have some pulmonera, which is kind of an evergreenish plant. Great foliage, beautiful spring flowers. Little splash of yellow there. That's Aurelia Sun King. So that one can get trimmed back as well. So really, there's just a few things that are showing right now. Fern, a painted fern. Some more pulmonaria back there. Some few heuchera. They're not doing super great, but you can see a little splash of burgundy here and there. Hydrangea. This is Let's Dance Ariba, or Let's Dance Can Do. Those we're not going to touch because those bloom off of the new and old growth. So we don't want to trim that because we don't want to sacrifice our early season blooms. There's a few hellebore over there. They're not going to get trimmed either. Another hydrangea and some Bernera. I feel like a lot of those spring bloomers, well, I shouldn't say that. I feel like shady spring bloomers, a lot of those are semi-evergreen here, like this Bernera. So this will die back-ish in the winter, but not totally. Alstroemeria, that was still blooming strong, so we didn't trim that yet. Roses. A hydrangea that was just lightly trimmed. Those are anemone, and in the middle of the anemone is another Amsonia storm cloud. So those look kind of, the storm cloud looks pretty when it's yellow with the pink flowers of the anemone, but now that they're all done, those will all get trimmed back. We're not afraid to do trimming in this garden. Like, I don't know, trimming is not a scary thing to us. When in doubt, we trim. Now, I have to be careful when I say that. A lot of the shrubs do bloom off of old growth, so we do have to be careful with which shrubs we are trimming. In the back there, oh my goodness, so cute. That is the new luminary coral something phlox. That thing has been blooming all summer long. Great color too. We'll put the name on the screen of what it actually is. I'm drawing a blank right now, but beautiful new phlox for 2023. Along the back hill, there's some evergreen hollies. Those just really don't do great back there. Like I mean, they're pretty old. They've been there for probably 5 or 6 years and they just aren't growing. So I don't know. I was hoping I could use those for my winter porch pots for cut greens, but because they're just so slow growers, which they're typically not that slow, they're just not doing what I want them to. So they're fine back there, but just one of those plants I was a little bit disappointed in. Daylilies, they've all been cut back really nice and tight. Ferns are dying up there back behind the pond. Beautiful hydrangea limelight. Those we're going to just, I don't know, well, depends. Depends if the gardeners get time. They may or may not get trimmed. They're kind of in a scruffy area, so if they don't get trimmed, it's not a huge deal. In the back there, there's some more anemone blooming. Now those are the 4-foot varieties, like Honoré Jobert, some white and some pink, so it's still pretty. This Henry Ayler's Rudbeckia is still going strong. This is a great plant, but it's a flopper. Like it gets so tall that it just spreads open. Because this is kind of a messy-ish part of the garden, I don't mind it because I love the blooms. Kind of like needle-like full petals. Just really a beautiful plant if you have kind of a space that you can let be a little bit wild and free. Bunch of hibiscus back there that are trimmed. This here is our incredible hydrangea. So this got trimmed back to 12 inches. The incredible was filling this whole area here you see where there's no plants, that whole big area. The incredible had kind of spread into this whole space. So the branch would lay flat on the ground, it would send down roots and kind of essentially create a new plant. And it was huge. And I'm like, this plant needs to get chopped back and brought back to its home plate. So we did that. And now it's kind of in its little location. So that's giving me a whole bunch of space here that hopefully we can plant some new things next year. So that's exciting because my garden kind of is running out of space. So we just kind of trimmed incredible, got her back in her little area. Now we got lots of fun space to plant in again. The grass there by that old rusty, I think it's a furnace-y thing, that's the Carl Forrester grass. Bobo Hydrangea, this one's trimmed back to about 18 inches. Invincible Spirit Hydrangea, about 2 foot. It's been trimmed back. The general rule of thumb with shrubs when trimming them is to take about the top third off. Sometimes you have to go more aggressive than that, but general rule of thumb is a third. This is Spirea, and that was nicely shaped up. Allium Millennium taken pretty much down to the ground. Here we have another Spirea, and I can't believe that we would have done this. So I think this is another situation of where the plants branch laid on the ground and created more plants. Because if I look overhead, this is like a grouping, it looks like a grouping of 3. And there's no way we would have planted 3 Spirea here because there's just not enough room for it. So I think we'll come in and dig out these front 2 and just put them somewhere on that back hill because they're way too close to the yard. They grow and get over the yard. Back there, that's Baptisia. That's another one that's kind of spread. Baptisia is usually slow and small to start, but as the years go on, it just continues to send up more and more flower spikes, creating a bigger and bigger clump. One thing with Baptisia or false indigo that I will give you a huge warning of, make sure when you plant that plant that it's in its forever home. They have huge tap roots, and if you try to move a Baptisia once it's established, it's almost nearly impossible. We broke three shovels, and even using a tow rope to try to get it out, you can see it didn't happen. It's still there. So those are definitely shovel breakers. So make sure you're planting them where you want them. Here's another beautiful coral berry because I love this one so much. That's why I planted the one in the front of the garden. It's just looking so nice, especially on this beautiful sunny day. Just a fun, different plant to add to the garden to give you kind of color in this kind of a mundane point in the season when there's just not a lot of exciting things going on. So people often ask me if we have deer pressure here in the garden, and typically we don't see many deer. But as I'm walking past here, there's evidence of deer all over the place in this garden. You can see all the little indents in the ground or their hoof prints. So yeah, we'll see next spring which plants are their plants of choice. Now, this is an Atlas Rose. And actually, I can tell this has been a plant of choice. I can see that they've nibbled off the buds at the top. Along the fence here, these are all Alstroemeria. So I planted one of every color Alstroemeria we carried this year. And most of these are Zone 8 hardy. So I have no intention of these coming back next year, but I'm doing a little trial. I want to see, maybe they will come back, maybe they won't. 90% chance they're not going to come back. But if they do, what a fun surprise that will be. We are in a little bit of a odd area here because in the back behind that berm, there's a creek that's always running. So sometimes we do get away with Zone 7 plants in this garden. Not often, but on occasion I have been able to have them come back a year or two if the season is just right that they'll come back. If you seed them in some coneflower, it need to get trimmed. We've got the Weigela Wine and Roses. This was trimmed this summer. This will bloom off of the old season's growth, so we don't want to do any trimming on this. But it's got really great foliage color, that beautiful burgundy foliage. A few more coneflowers that will get trimmed. Another thing is our limelight hydrangea. This was a beast of a plant, well over 8 foot, who knows, 9, even maybe 10 foot. And it was just getting really tall. So we went ahead, oh, chipmunk. We went ahead and trimmed this down to about 3.5 foot. Got rid of a lot of the little dead branches that were in there. So you can see there's a lot of substantial stems. So we'll see how this comes back next year. I'm gonna put a bet out there, right? Not a real bet, but we'll just do a flower bet. The flowers on this plant next year are going to be huge. So stay tuned to next summer video, and let's see how huge the flowers are probably going to be on this plant. In the past, we've trimmed this plant back pretty significantly and have had about 18-inch long blooms, which is at least twice as long as what they normally are. So I'm anticipating really large blooms on this limelight next year. This little space in the garden, this was planted last season, so a lot of just still fairly young-ish things, but we'll be able to come through here and just get these all cut back to the ground as well. This is a incredible hydrangea. We'll just cut the flowers off of that and call that good. I can see the deer have even been up as far as this front of this garden, so they're not just sticking along the back, which they previously had done. So they're getting braver and braver. So I just hope it's not a sign of more deer coming to my garden. There is one less deer though, because I did see out on the road 2 doors down, somebody hit one. So one less deer to worry about in the garden. So hopefully you've enjoyed this fall garden tour. Not a lot of color, but hopefully a lot of information as far as trimming, what to trim, how far to dare to trim. And if you have questions, as always, we do encourage you to leave your questions and comments below. We'll be sure to answer them for you. And if there was anything we talked about today that, you're like, I can't really envision it because it's not really flowering, head to some of our summer videos and just check them out to see all the beautiful blooms that were in this garden earlier this season. This is Heidi from Garden Crossings.